Окей. Доброго вечора, шановні.
Good evening, dear colleagues, dear journalists. We are starting the latest briefing at the Ukrainian Crisis Center. The European member parliaments are from left to right, Mr. Demesmaeker, then Petras Auštrevičius, Richard Howitt from Mr. Arne Lietz from Germany. Dear colleagues, I'm inviting to the floor. We are working in English. If you need translation, you can listen to your earphones.
Should we do that one? That's better, isn't it? So good evening, everyone. Thank you very much for joining us. This is an informal press briefing. We're on the record, though, and we're happy that you report us. But we're also pleased to meet you and pleased to be in this crisis centre and know the role that it plays in relation to the challenges and troubles of this country. We are 5 members of the European Parliament. We are 5 members of the European Parliament from the Human Rights Subcommittee of the European Parliament. My name is Richard Howitt. I am a British member of the European Parliament from the Parliament's Socialists and Democrat group. And my 4 colleagues will introduce themselves from the different European Union countries and political parties that they represent. My role is to chair the delegation this week on behalf of the MEPs. We have a formal press conference with our other MEP colleagues on Friday that we cordially invite you to, but we're very happy to take part in an informal briefing tonight on the progress of our mission so far. I'll make 3 points. Firstly, we've really focused on the issue of the internally displaced persons of Ukraine. We've been in Dnipro and we've discussed those issues with the Human Rights Committee of the Parliament here, with international agencies here, with diplomatic colleagues and with NGOs. We'll have further discussions with government and others in the remainder of the week. But we certainly want to express our solidarity with those that have suffered from the fighting in this country and our support for the country and for European links with the country. But in that spirit, also want to express our concern that the challenges of supporting the over 1 million internally displaced persons of this country are great, to commit ourselves to work with this country to meet those challenges, and to explain that we have been in detailed discussions about respect for the full rights of those internally displaced people. We believe that they have a right to vote in the local elections that take place here in October. We believe that the registration system as it is currently operating may be leading to too many of the internally displaced persons being deregistered but still being in real need, and that is of a concern for us that we've been in discussion with our Ukrainian counterparts on. We've heard from many that the efforts are focused on providing humanitarian aid to people who are desperately in need of it, and we praise that, but also that there is a big need to move also towards long-term planning so that those displaced people are able to have long-term solutions for their housing, for employment and for their livelihoods. We've heard how there is a draft cabinet minute of the government, that there will be a coordinated responsibility by government for internally displaced people, and we encourage that to take place so that there isn't a fragmentation of responses in terms of the internally displaced people. And we are concerned about the system of passes, the electronic passes having been brought in as much as the previous system of paper passes, leading to restrictions on freedom of access and freedom of movement, including the operation of bribery at checkpoints, which is having a severely disadvantageous effect socially, restricting the rights of people who are most socially disadvantaged and perhaps restricting their movements more than any, but also leading to a system where there is corruption and lack of transparency, which are challenges that the European Union, together with Ukraine, are seeking to combat and to drive out of this society. I'm sure my colleagues will also comment, but I will add one more thing. It is very clear that the humanitarian access to the non-government controlled areas in Donetsk and Luhansk is leading, the restrictions on that humanitarian access is leading to real and genuine hardship and need in terms of the water supply, supply of electricity, access to food and to medicines. We're not saying that the responsibility for that lies on one side and one side alone, that there is a mutual responsibility there. But I think our emerging belief is that just as we in the European Union want to support the territorial integrity of Ukraine and to ensure that this nation, as a nation, is supported, that something which has been described to us as being a blockade on the non-government controlled areas is driving more division and polarization in this country and making a solution that preserves the territorial integrity of the country more difficult. And so we are in discussion with our Ukrainian friends and counterparts, reflecting on the impact of those restrictions of humanitarian access and how they might be overcome. I won't say any more, but I'll hand over to my colleague, Petras Auštrevičius.
Thank you, Richard. Indeed, I'm Petras Auštrevičius. I'm from Lithuania, representing Human Rights Subcommittee as well as Foreign Affairs Committee. And indeed, I think we came on the right time to visit Ukraine, a country which is under the great challenges and was and remains to be under great challenges from different aspects: security, economic, as well as displaced persons' point of view. I'm of a strong belief that Ukraine needs a very effective, newly shaped, new approach about internally displaced persons. The situation like this can't be sustainable. Close to 2 million internally displaced persons, it's a big economic and social challenge for a country, but the country needs a proper response, a better registration, displacement, and more effective supply of those people with all things in need. Indeed, the international donors should and must support Ukraine with all they should, but Ukraine should show a bit different approach to internally displaced persons. Again, I have to inform you that last week in the European Parliament we have collected 82 signatures supporting the UN International Tribunal because of the deadly accident with the MH17. We do support Ukraine on this endeavor. We believe that UN should take a very responsible and effective action towards establishing this international tribunal, and we're looking forward for effective investigation, and those responsible and those who committed this inhuman crime should be brought into responsibility. And again, in the European Parliament we continue with a series of public hearings about the violation of human rights in annexed Crimea as well as in eastern Ukraine. Here we are looking forward for even more effective exchange of opinions with the NGOs, experts involved, as well as Ukrainian authorities in order to prepare a solid report about, on annual basis about this situation. And finally, today in Ukrainian press, we saw an announcement about the visit of a group of French members of parliament to Crimea. And I have to admit, it does not correspond to the European Parliament's position. We deplore this visit. It's not in line with the EU position. It's a private visit. It has nothing to do with the European Union positions about Crimea. Crimea is annexed by the Russian Federation. It remains to be legally a part of the, Ukraine. So this is my statement. Thank you.
Thank you. I am Mark Demesmaeker. I am also an active member of the Subcommittee of Human Rights, also in the Foreign Affairs Committee and in the Environmental Committee. And I'm a member of the ECR group, which is the European Conservatives and Reformists group in the European Parliament. Not the first time in Ukraine, and very much involved also in the delegation and in the informal group Friends of European Ukraine, which Petras presides. I won't repeat what Petras and Richard have already said. I just want to reinforce that if we can draw one conclusion halfway our visit here, then it is that the issue of IDPs is priority number one, and the freedom of movement. Almost all our interlocutors mentioned this as a very big problem. I would add that one of the things we heard struck me when he said that it deepens the divide. We should be aware that the situation as it is now, the de facto blockade, and denying people crossing the line to visit their relatives, to visit their friends, to visit the region where they originally come from, deepens the divide. It alienates people more, even more, from Ukrainian authorities, from the Ukrainian society, and that is wrong. We should try to build bridges instead of deepening this divide. It was a very useful visit to Dnipropetrovsk because human rights is about human beings very well alive. A doctor, a woman doctor, a female doctor in her 50s, a student of 22, studying history, a single mother. They all were displaced because they couldn't live under very harsh war conditions, and who are facing very, very concrete problems in the way they are trying to build their lives up again elsewhere in Ukraine, as my two colleagues have already said. So this is indeed priority number one. I myself, as a former journalist, have raised also concerns about other issues, human rights and fundamental rights issues, where Ukraine should show that it is trying to be a modern European country, that is being very firm on anti-discrimination, being very firm in defending the rights of free speech and the rights of free media, because there are some concerns as well.
Здравствуйте, меня зовут Arne Lietz.
My name is Arne Lietz.
In group Socialists and Democrats from Germany, from the SPD, from the Social Democratic Party. I'm a member of 3 committees, in the Committee of Human Rights, of Development and Foreign Politics. I have been here a few months ago, and we really looked at the situation on the human rights issue, also on, as my colleague just mentioned, free media. For me, we are facing a situation which is going not only be in a difficult situation here in Ukraine, but also throughout Europe. If I talk on propaganda, if I talk on free media and the difficulties to set the situation and describe the situation, which is even more difficult here in the situation in this country, being in a war situation. Nevertheless, that is crucial that human rights situations are being shown on all sides which are happening. If you look at the people which were captured on the military situation on both sides, so these were issues we talked today about. Besides that, it is for me very important also to raise the issue on human rights for kids, the social situation on kids. We have heard, and I'm very thankful for having had many meetings with NGOs, the problems of young kids not being able to be registered as their parents are not being able to go with them across the border or across the checkpoints. But also the situation not getting the subsidy support for them, not having education opportunities and lacking of this. So this is something we as the European Union have to contribute to the highest extent as possible to support that right also for the kids to get educated. And besides that, I would like to highlight also a meeting which is happening on Friday. We have a whole human rights agenda which are going to be discussed by the Commission and by your government here in Ukraine. And so we are the parliamentary side, so to say, on this. We had a pre-meeting before and we have a meeting afterwards. So we tackle this issue together on the human rights development inside Ukraine from the parliamentary side, as the Commission and your government is also having close contact on this. And I leave it with here.
Good afternoon, Andrei Plenković. Very happy to join the DROA committee delegation to Kiev as a vice chairman of the Foreign Affairs Committee and the head of the European Parliament's delegation for Ukraine, in which through the Parliamentary Association Committee, together with my colleague Ostap Semerak, we work and observe and monitor the implementation of the association agreement. I believe there are two main messages, both related to the substance of our discussion with a number of interlocutors today, related to the internally displaced persons and to their return to their homes. And that is the support for Ukraine's reintegration of its currently occupied territories by peaceful means, by giving a proper effort for the Minsk agreement to be fully implemented, and that especially goes as the main message to Moscow, to provide strong support and basically make sure that those on the other side of the front line, the so-called DNR and LNR, stick to the commitments that were agreed in Minsk. The second main objective is also to send across the message that human rights are the main values of the European Union, and therefore they are part of our human rights dialogue agenda, but also part of the political criteria and political aspect of the implementation of the association agreement. That's why inclusive approach from the government authorities, from RADA, reaching out towards the civil society, towards NGOs, to all concerned actors in order to enhance the level of protection of human rights. No country has a contingency for more than 1.3 million internally displaced persons, and therefore Ukraine needs support in setting up adequate institutional framework, adequate legislative framework, and adequate budgetary resources being allocated to caring for those who are unfortunately driven away from their homes. In that respect, the European Union, the European Commission, through EU budget, the member states have already extended their hand very strongly. Our colleague Commissioner Stylianides was recently in Ukraine, exactly sending across the message, and together with the overall financial support that Ukraine is being given, bearing in mind Ukraine is #1 country as the recipient of the EU's assistance in the world at the moment, in total. And therefore, my political message is we are here together with the colleagues that will join us tomorrow and the day after tomorrow to give a strong helping hand to Ukraine on its European path and the reintegration of occupied territories, including the illegally annexed Crimea. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Чи є питання або уточнення журналістів?
Do journalists have any questions or remarks?
For coming. So the question I had speaks to the point made about aid from the EU given to Ukraine. A lot of the criticism that has been going around recently is saying that there has not been enough support on the part of the West going to Ukraine. My question to you is, what would you say to these claims? Would you say that they are somewhat accurate, or would you disagree, or?
In a way, I anticipated your question. As I said, Ukraine is the #1 country in terms of the international assistance provided by the European Union globally. The element that we have is also to bear in mind that a large proportion of the United Nations assistance that comes to Ukraine also comes from the budgets of the EU member states. So, I'm sorry?
You said United States.
From the European Union member states. EU. It's the English reflex. I don't normally have this special partnership so much, but I was in Washington last week, so it might be my mistake. I'm sorry. So I don't think actually this is true. So that's why it is important to bear in mind the information that Commissioner Stylianides provided when he was here. I think it was 3 weeks ago, and the work of the delegation, work of the European Commission's Humanitarian Office, a number of NGOs which are involved. I think it is a very strong support, also including the macro-financial assistance that goes directly into the Ukrainian budget, so as to ensure the sound public finances and to ensure the normal functioning of the country. And therefore, I think we can very easily provide arguments that this is actually not true.
Thank you very much. I would like from Ukraine Crisis Media Center as well. So you have mentioned that you support the position that Crimea belongs to Ukraine legally. Do you think European Union could do anything to help Ukraine get part of its territory back?
Do ask that question again on Friday when we have our press conference with our Foreign Affairs Committee colleagues. But what I want to assure everyone tonight is that we're concerned about human rights in Crimea. We've met with Crimean Tatars. We've heard from the monitoring mission on what it's aware of in terms of human rights in Crimea. We've raised and had raised with us issues about lack of access for humanitarian reasons across the border into Crimea as it is today. You've heard the statement made tonight, which we all stand by. That's on behalf of all of our delegation, and that's a very clear answer in terms of where the European Parliament has stood and does stand in terms of the illegal annexation. And we are also have heard reports around how continued trade via Crimea might be being used in a way which breaches sanctions, which are European Union sanctions within an international framework. And clearly we're concerned about those reports, and I'm sure that that will be subject to further discussion in the next days, and we may have more to say about that on Friday.
Thank you very much. And how long generally are you going to stay in Ukraine? How long is the visit?
The visit is until Friday, and we will be meeting we expect to be meeting and hope to be meeting and look forward to meeting the Prime Minister and the President on Friday. We will have that further press point on Friday afternoon when we would hope to be able to say a little more.
Thank you very much. Чи є питання або уточнення?
Are there any clarifications or questions?
Clarifications from the journalists. If not, we would thank you very much, and we would be looking forward to meeting you on Friday after you have all the meetings with Ukrainian officials on regards of human rights. Thank you very much for coming over to Ukraine Crisis Media Center. Дякую, шановні колеги. На цьому будемо завершувати наш прес-брифінг і робочий день. І дякуємо шановним європарламентарям.
Under your request only. I want this. It wouldn't be right without. Can we?
Okay, just wait.
Microphone. Yeah.